But I do want you to ask questions. I'll ask him if you will let me know if anything pops up in the chat just because I can't see it. And I've got a lot of information here. And then this presentation actually has some information that I'm not going to go over, but it's there for you for your use. So let's jump in. So this is Bonnaroo Music and Arts Festival in Manchester, Tennessee. And I know you're wondering why I'm showing you this given the topic. But the reason I'm showing you this is to get you thinking about all the different kinds of businesses that are involved in putting on something that a lot of us take for granted, whether it's a festival or a concert, some kind of event. When you think about all the businesses that go into putting on this kind of event, there are tons of them. And so as you thought about it, maybe some of these are the ones that you were thinking of. And so all of these different businesses, whether it's your musician, your attorneys, your professional services, to the people who run the janitorial, the porta potties, the concessions, they all have different licensing in some cases. They all have different financial needs. And so when you think about that kind of business, as with all businesses, really comes down to the right resource at the right time. And that also means capital. And so some of these businesses, maybe your ticketing businesses, they could actually be really highly innovative businesses and have gotten equity funding. Some of them started out, maybe they do the promotional materials, and they do that as a side business to a regular job. So there's this whole spectrum of people, and that means there's a whole bunch of different needs when it comes to capital. So I like this picture one because it gives you an understanding of the easiest money to access to the most difficult money to access. And I'm going to touch on this again when we talk about Fund Tennessee. But when you think about money for your business and accessing money for your business, think about the easiest money to get. That's what's in your pocket. Family, friends, and some people call them the 3Fs, family, friends, and fools. Those are the people that's the easiest money to get. And then it goes all the way down to, and you'll see venture capital and really complicated, non-traditional kind of crossover. But one thing I want you to notice is where angel capital is. So you see that's down towards the bottom. And a lot of people think that angel capital is really easy. It's, really fluffy and nice because it's called angel. And but it's not. It's not that they're not nice people in general, but angel capital is a first risk kind of capital when it comes to businesses that are looking for equity. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. But then I also want to point out, and I know I've got some abbreviations in here because sometimes the words are just so long, but if you see that one that says CDFI, so that's Community Development Financial Institutions. So like angel capital is that first money in that's higher risk for moving into the venture equity side. CDFIs a lot of times are the first money in for businesses that are a little bit higher risk. So as you think about them, and there's all different kinds of CDFIs that focus on different things. And sometimes they're very specific to an area. They might work in a neighborhood. And then some of them are really big and they work across the whole state, but they have a whole range of funding. But a lot of times after you come out of, money in your pocket, your savings, credit cards, hopefully not, some kind of peer lending, crowdfunding, that's a lot of times can be that next best step for a business. So with that in mind, I want to talk about a little bit about Fund Tennessee, and then I'm going to talk about resources and where to find them, and then take your questions. So Fund Tennessee is a new program. We just launched it this summer. It's been in the works for quite a while. And the U.S. Department of Treasury is administering funds made available by Congress. And Tennessee was allocated $117 million for about a 10-year program. And we've broken that money into 60% equity and 40% debt. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that part of it. But the core part of this is that this is a tool There are lots of great funding sources in our state, but this is another tool, and the intent of it was, like it says, to support and expand an inclusive continuum of access to capital for small businesses and entrepreneurs throughout Tennessee. And what we found in our research, our surveys, et cetera, is that we have some gaps in funding when it comes to access to capital. And so we're looking to fill those gaps as this program develops. So going back to that right capital at the right time, right resource at the right time, Fund Tennessee has 3 components under it. So FundTN, which is our partner going through our partnership with Launch Tennessee. They will receive up to $70 million over the term of the program for equity investments. And so that is a really great piece that's been missing in our spectrum of capital. And then FundTN, which I mentioned the CDFIs earlier, you'll see it there, Community Development Financial Institutions. So we've brought on our Community Development Financial Institutions statewide, and that is $47 million up to it across the up to 10-year program. And then FundTN, we have partnered with the Tennessee Small Business Development Centers, or the TSBDCs, to help with this technical assistance side. And so on both the equity and debt side, or the FundTN and FundTN side, we have people who are going to need help in getting ready to receive capital or preparing different things. And so where FundTN comes in is that it helps with those legal, accounting, kind of fiscal services, but then also other services as the program develops. So that's just a little brief overview. You'll notice it says fundtennessee.org. Please visit that website to find out more. And if that's something that you, or maybe somebody you know, is looking for funding, that's a really great place to find information and to stay up to date on what's going on. So again, I just wanted to show you that picture again, so it's a little bit more top of mind. So we're working with CDFIs across the state for FundTN, and we're working with Launch Tennessee with the FundTN program on that venture capital side. And excuse me, I can tell I'm sounding congested. Been dealing with a little bit of a summer cold, so. All right, so let's talk about, I'm going to pause for a second. Kim, are there any questions in the chat since I can't see them?
No, there are not. So we will have time for chat for questions
okay.
at the end. But if anyone has questions, they can feel free to put that in the chat and we can answer them as they come in.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about where to find some other resources. So locating resources. This is Bureau's website, as mentioned, Business Enterprise Resource Office. But there are a couple things that I want to bring to your attention. One is topics for economic inclusion. That is if you are in one of the designated state or federal kind of certification categories, there's information on policy and different resources that you can access. Obviously, being that you're attending through the Governor's Office of Diversity Business Enterprise, or Go-DBE, as it's often referred to, that you're familiar with that. But there's more resources there, so please feel free to look at that. Under quick links. So this is one that is interesting for a lot of people. And this is a combination of, if there's something we talk about today and you're trying to remember what was the name of that resource, this is a good place to kind of find a listing of different resources that are state, federal, and some nonprofit kind of entrepreneur support organization type resources. So under quick links, there's that. And then there's also a section on grants, because I know a lot of people have questions about grants. So at the state level, there's kind of 3 areas where grants tend to come in. One is if a person is receiving disability payments, SSI, or I think it's SSDI, there is this program called the Self-Employment Program that operates through the Department of Human Services, and it's often referred to as VOC Rehab. But that program helps somebody who is receiving payments to be able to start a business and it not disrupt their payments. It's really important for somebody who's gone through that whole process to not have their payments disrupted while they get their business started. So that's one area. Another area is some kind of high-tech development. And SBIR or STTR, which is Small Business Innovation and Research Grants, or Small Business Technology Transfer and Research Grants. Those are grants that are made available through the federal government. One of the big ones is the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy, National Health Sciences. They put out grants for people to bring a product to commercialization or to bring a product to the point where that agency can use it and implement it. So that's another area where there are grants. The third area where you run into grants are in agriculture. Tennessee is still a very agricultural state, still one of its highest exports. But grants tied to that are kind of in that value added area. So if you grow strawberries, you make strawberry jam, you sell the jam, that's a value add. There are a variety of value add processes. So those are the three kind of primary ones. A lot of the businesses, when it comes to incentives, that is a different area, and that is tied to capital investment and a number of employees hired and the wages those employees earn. So that's determined through our state legislature. One other area I'll mention that has been done really well at kind of keeping a list of different grants is Hello Alice, and that's helloalice.com. And I believe it's helloalice.com. So Hello Alice, they've done, and it kind of started through COVID, and they've been a really great place to be able to locate some of the private grants, some of the more unusual grants, or grants that are targeted towards specific groups. One word of caution is please be careful when you're doing research on grants. There are tons of people who are making money helping, and I have air quotes on that, helping people find grants. And you can pay money to them, but realistically, the majority of the grants that are out there, they're free for you to find. You do have to do the research, but there are all kinds of resources, including the small business development centers. We have regional entrepreneur centers. And so there's a lot of resources that are available to you where they're not going to ask you for your credit card. It is free, and they're there to help you grow your business. I'm going to talk about a couple other things as far as resources. So the Tennessee Smart Start Guide, this is an online interactive tool. We started it as a print version, and there is a PDF on the website that's a print version that's more of a reference resource. This guide is really helpful. It allows the user to do three things. It gives them a checklist on how to register a business in the state of Tennessee. For those of you who have done that, you know that is not a very intuitive process. So this gives you a checklist. It allows you to create a business model canvas, which is kind of an interactive, sort of more dynamic version of a business plan. And so if you're an existing business and thinking, well, I don't need any of this, the business model canvas, another thing you can do with that is if you're trying to decide on some other revenue stream, this can let you kind of think it out on through a different resource. So the other thing is that it gives you all kinds of resources. And a lot of times, anyone who's starting a business knows that can be a really intimidating process. And so this business model canvas, it gives that person a way to understand what they still don't know about their business, but it also gives them a way to talk to one of those resources about their business and what they're looking to do. And a lot of times that helps them convey their ideas better. So it's a great resource for you to use. Here's some visuals for you. So you have the business model canvas. There are ad lib questions that you answer them and they populate your canvas. There's the checklist that's on Smart Start. But under the PDF resources, there are a couple PDFs there. Again, the Smart Start Guide, the print copy version, which is current and up to date, and then this visual checklist, and also the business model canvas. So if you really like it, you could print it and write on it directly. That's a great way to do it as well. And this is one of those random things that a lot of people overlook, and something I would encourage you to do. At the bottom of our website, there are all these really great resources, and a couple of them I want to point out is publications and maps. So there's all kinds of white papers, industry reports. If you're doing any kind of research and you're wanting more information, that's a really good place to look at. For doing, whether you're looking at the chemical industry or the film and music industry. So it's a broad range, lots of great resources there. Also, the county profile tool. The county profile tool brings together a lot of publicly available information, some information that's specific to Tennessee. It tells you about the industries that are in that community, different, all the different levels from education to housing to income. So it's a good resource, again, if you're doing research for your business and you're trying to find out about other areas, that community or that county profile tool is a really good asset. Two more things, photo assets. So there is a Flickr account. There are pictures from all across Tennessee. As long as you source it properly, it's a really good resource for finding images potentially for you to use. And then lastly, we do a newsletter that the department does. It comes out once a week. It's not that you don't get overwhelmed with emails, but it tells you about announcements. So it's going to tell you about new companies landing or expanding. It will tell you about different opportunities to communities predominantly, different resources. If you have experienced a disaster in your community, information about disaster resources, SBA loans, disaster declarations, that kind of thing gets posted there. So I do recommend that's something you consider signing up for. It's a good information resource for you to have at your disposal. On the community level, there are a few things that are good for you to know about. So there's something called the Tennessee Placemakers Entrepreneurship Fund. So this is available to nonprofits, governments, or educational institutions. And the intent of it is to help support, develop, train the small businesses and entrepreneurs in a given community. And a lot of communities have taken advantage of this, whether it's a Main Street community that has opened a co-work space or some kind of food kitchen where, food related businesses are able to go in and use it. This is a good resource to know about. It's not intended for individual small businesses. You do have to be a nonprofit and you do have to impact a broader group, but it's good to know about. If you see this come up or if there's something in your community that you really need, this is something you can talk to your Main Street, if you have a Tennessee downtown organization, if you're 3-star, your mayors. It's good information to have to know about that you can help your community pursue. And that looks like a bunch of different things all the way from the most rural to the most urban areas. So take a look at that. Again, on the community side, there's something called the a Smart Start Community Initiative. And the idea behind that is that there are a group of people in the community, and that includes your businesses, libraries, your mayors, your Main Street directors. And the intent there is that when somebody comes into your community and they're interested in starting a business, or somebody who's already in your community wants to start a business, that there are some resources readily available at their disposal, because the community knows what they are and they can direct somebody to that right resource at the right time. All right, I mentioned disaster earlier, and this is what I'm going to wrap up with. I know this is a lot of people resist figuring this out for their business. It is super important when you talk about business resilience, but disaster is one of those things, and it can happen in small ways and it can happen in big ways. And so doing some continuity planning is really important. For those of you who have experienced a disaster, I think that you'll recognize this, what I call the arc of disaster. For those of you that haven't, this is what your fellow businesses, your fellow communities are kind of experiencing in that period. And so we've had a fair number of disasters, designated, presidentially designated disasters in Tennessee. So it is something that is really important to kind of keep in mind as you think about the development and growth of your business, and making sure from that fiscal financial perspective that should you experience one, that you're going to come out of that successfully. There are all kinds of great resources for that. Again, I have some that are hidden, but I don't want to take up too much more time, but I'm happy to answer questions. Feel free to put them in the chat. And also at the end, we'll open it up and you'll be able to ask questions from there directly. And that is all I have for right now.
Thank you so much, Wisty. Does anyone have any questions that they want to specifically ask her? Otherwise, we will get going on the second portion of this presentation.
You are seeing the main screen, right? I stopped sharing.
Yes, you are.
Okay.
I don't see anything in
All right.
there, so I will go ahead and
Okay.
have Richard take over. So Richard is the lead for Go-DBE. He will be doing kind of the presentation portion of clicking through the slides, and then I will present on the first half. He will present on the second half, and then we will open it up for questions just to be in general. So go ahead, Richard, and take over the screen for that.
Are you being able to see the main presentation?
Yes, I can see, but it just shows the next slide on there, if that's okay. And the notes.
Oh, it shows the notes.
Yes.
Just a moment. Let me try something else here. Just a moment. How are we doing there?
Perfect.
Okay.
So for our portion, we are going to talk about the myths of DBE certifications and government contracts. Go ahead to the next slide. So we're going to go over a few things. We're going to do the introductions, kind of explain the different portions of Go-DBE, our program overview on the policies, myths about DBE certifications and government contracts. We'll give opportunity for questions and also provide you with each of the liaisons' contact information. So our program, Go-DBE, or the Governor's Office of Diversity Business Enterprise, was amended on April 2nd of 2012 that did establish our program within the General Services Department under the direction of the Central Procurement Office. The central point of contact is to attract and assist minority-owned, women-owned, persons with disability, service-disabled veteran-owned, and small businesses to compete successfully for state procurements and contracting activities. Our strategy is we work with our partners and other state agencies to support diversity business enterprises. Our goals are to develop these enterprises into viable, successful businesses and ensure that there is optimal level of diversity in state contracting. So we're going to briefly go over the eligibility requirements of each of the 5 categories, which many of the businesses I believe in here are already certified, so you guys are aware of those. So all businesses certified with Go-DBE must be a continuing independent for-profit business and meet one of these 5 categories. So minority owned is at least 51% owned and controlled by one or more individuals in one of the minority categories of either African American, Asian American, Native American, or Hispanic American. WBE, or women owned, is at least 51% owned or controlled by one or more women, or in the case of a publicly owned business, at least 51% of the stock is owned and controlled by one or more women. Service disabled veteran, that is going to be a person who served honorably on active duty and at least in the armed forces of the United States and at least 20% disabled that is service connected. Persons with disability is a business owned by a person with a disability that is continuing independent for profit and at least 51% owned and controlled by one or more persons with a disability. Just to note, that is the only certification that does require you to be recertified every year, because we do need a note from the doctor every year. Otherwise, the other 4 categories, the renewal is every 3 years. For small business, a business has a total gross income of no more than $10 million averaged over a 3-year period, or employs no more than 99 employees on a full-time basis. So only one of those 2 need to be met. So I'll pass that over to Richard for the myths about DBE certifications and government contracts.
Okay. Thank you, Kim. Good morning, everyone. We wanted to cover a few areas that might be misunderstood, and we'll start with some acronyms. You'll have to pardon my voice a little bit today too, as well. So the first thing that comes up typically as far as misunderstood is the acronym DBE. So for us in our office with the state of Tennessee, that stands for a diversity business enterprise, pretty much done by the type of business, as Kim mentioned about the 5 categories. On the federal side, a DBE is a disadvantaged business enterprise. Okay, so it's a little bit different. There's some similar qualifications. Basically, the minority groups that we deal with are also included in there, and women generally. And then on a case-by-case basis, others can be included in that as well. Now, the main difference here is that on the federal level, the amount of documentation that you'll have to provide is much greater. So you'll have, let's say, 3 years of taxes. You'll have to prove your net worth. Typically, net worth will be under 1.3 million. And there's different things that they include in that and things that they don't include for the net worth. But it's a lot more proof of who you are as far as financial. And as I mentioned, so keep in mind here, our program, we deal with the 5 categories, and we do call them DBE certifications because we are Go-DBE, but there is a difference. Central Procurement Office for the CPO, that's another acronym that comes up frequently. Our office actually is co-located in the Central Procurement Office, so we can be involved in what the state procures and understand who is doing what with what agency. And that helps us keep in the know as far as our diversity businesses and get them involved. SWC is a statewide contract. ATC, the agency term contract. There's many more, but obviously with the statewide contract, it's open to the entire state, where the agency contract is only focused with that department or agency. Some things about certification and the myths that go around that. You know, we do get the information from people that, hey, I don't need a certification right now, but you may not actually at that very moment, but you know, 2 weeks from now you might need it, and that's what typically happens. We'll get a phone call. People are desperate. I need a certification yesterday, you know, and it can't work that fast. And so they're in a process of a bid, or if it's your company, you know, you do need to get the certification as soon as possible, so you'll be ready when that opportunity does come knocking. And it's a much easier process. You don't have to be rushed in your documents that you'll end up providing, but it's very helpful whether it's the state or local governments. Maybe you want to do business with another state, so that's where reciprocity comes in. We are surrounded by many states, so maybe you want to have a project going on in let's say in Virginia, and Virginia says, well, you need to be certified in your home state first. And that's where that comes into play. You can immediately be involved in their certification process to become certified and participate in their contracts that they have. The other areas that often comes up is they can have multiple certifications in categories, which here in the state we do not. You can only be certified in one category at a time, even though you may qualify for more in a sense. You may be a woman, minority, a small business, maybe you're a service disabled veteran. You could actually have any one of those to be certified in. Whereas in the federal level, they want you to be certified in all of them. A whole different view of the process. The state of Tennessee decided early on that we only want to do certifications in one category, because otherwise we end up double counting or triple counting the same business or the same dollars. And since there's no actual edge of one certification over another in a procurement process, one has as far as much validity as the other one does. With us also, you only have to provide 1 year of taxes, the most recent for the business, not 3 years of taxes as in not only the federal government, but some of the private organizations as well across the US. They'll have you provide 3 years of taxes and of course, the net worth as well. On the operating agreement, unless you're a single member, it is required to have a copy of your operating agreement as an LLC. So, and it is important. A lot of these documents like operating agreement and other ones as well, it really tells who is going to take over the business in the event that you're not there, or what's the line of progression of individuals running the business. And so it's as it says here, it's crucial to you to have that written down and what the progression will be in the future. The other false myth is that small businesses don't qualify as diversity businesses. They do here in the state. Small business, service disabled business, persons with disabilities, they all qualify here in the state of Tennessee as a diversity business. The other area I want to mention about today is about supplier diversity and the myths around that. So what is supplier diversity? It is related to the procurement side. That's really what it's mainly aligned with. It's closely aligned with the government procurement and corporate strategy, so it's very business oriented. It is a strategic initiative, and one of the main areas about it is that it can be measured and then reported. Everything can be measurable with that. So the confusion comes from around the word diversity, and it's used a lot Obviously, we hear about it every day in the news, but sometimes it gets a little confusing. It's sort of mixed with a lot of different areas. So what supplier diversity is not, it's not a social or governance, environmental type reporting. It's not really exactly diversity, equity, and inclusion. So all these are people-centric. It's workplace issues, as we have here, employment issues or practices. So we're not dealing with the people aspect in that fashion. Ours is very focused on the business side, what the state procures, and the involvement of those businesses. Levels of government. I just briefly wanted to cover this only because we know there's different levels, federal, state, county, city, but we often get phone calls from individuals asking us about a particular procurement that's going on, and it may be with a city or a county. And how come we don't know anything about it? Well, that's definitely on another level, as it would be with the federal government. Each level has their own procurements, their own little bylaws and statutes that they abide by. So government is not one size fits all. It's different in every aspect. And the state is probably the one who crosses over the most between federal and city and county because it is in the middle. The other myth that goes on quite a bit is about the cost. And some of the certifications that are out there do cost in the private sector. Some of them are dependent on how much you make on your annual sales. So the more of the annual sales that you have, the costlier it is for the certification. It's, you might say it's a little bit similar to what Wisty was talking about with the grants that are out there available, and people can help you to locate that. And it's the same way for certification. There are individuals and organizations that will help you to get certified at a cost. And some of the costs are fairly steep. So not to say that they wouldn't do that as far as helping you get the certification, but it is quite a bit upfront sometimes to do that. The other areas that, once you get certification, there isn't a guaranteed contract after that point. We tried with our language and our contracts in the bid process. They're a little bit different between ITBs, invitations to bid, and RFPs, the request for proposals. But there is language in there and goals that agencies have. So, but there still is no guaranteed contract. The certification puts you out there. It's somewhat like an additional resume for you. We become somewhat of a mini advertising arm. Your name of your company is on our website that can be seen by anybody for that matter, whether it's in state government or in the private sector or even in the counties and cities. A lot of people look at the certified listing every day, depending on what they're looking for, and they can find that. We currently have over 2,000, so it's something that really can be taken advantage of in all aspects of government and private sector. Certification does not take 3 to 6 months. We generally ask for about 30 days. Depends on the complication of the business, ownership, control, how many people are involved, maybe different ethnicities, different genders. It just depends on how complicated and the documentation that we have or that we don't have to prove that. One of the other things we wanted to cover, you might hear the word about set-aside programs. State of Tennessee government does not have a set-aside program unless you're involved with TDOT, Airport Authority, all the transportation organizations, because they are part of the federal government and part of the state. So they do have to abide by federal government, as that's the largest institution, obviously, over the U.S. The executive branch agencies in the state, University of Tennessee and the Board of Regents. They're all involved in the state government. Now, instead of the set-aside program, this I mentioned just briefly, the state does have contracts, contracts. They have goals with all the state agencies and departments. That's everybody in the executive branch. That's who most people are familiar with. That's everyone from agriculture to veterans. So general services, finance and administration, agriculture, all have goals with us. And we sit down with them once or twice a year to go over those. And even though it's only a goal, and some people wonder why we don't have an absolute mandate or set asides, well, it's a little bit different approach that we've had great success with, because as we report to the governor and General Assembly every year on how the agencies did that year, no one really wants to talk to the governor and explain why they did not meet their goal. And a little bit different approach. So they have more of a vested interest in it, and more than one person in their agency to really see what they can do in actually prime contracting and subcontracting in what they procure. Down here at the bottom, mentioned about in these RFPs, the contracts are not always by low bid. There's other aspects, especially in the technical side, maybe a service aspect of the procurement. Might be out of 100 points, maybe price is around 30 to 40% of that 100%. So there's other things involved. The state will consider questions. Comes up frequently. But the thing with questions, which you can do, and especially in written questions, there's a allotted time period for that. You can actually help if you needed to change a contract. You might have an issue with the contract the way it's written before you've actually bid. That agency can go back and take a look. If it's a benefit to both sides, it's possible that they could change some of that contract. So as it says, they're not told stone before they're awarded. But for larger contracts, it is important to have your legal team involved, reviewing the contract, make sure that you can abide by the contract if you do win it. Generally, this state's not going to disqualify you if you have a minor technicality up front. It does have to be fairly minor, but we don't want to eliminate businesses. We definitely, the state really wants to have as much competition as possible. And those coordinators of the procurement, they're there to assist you. Okay, with that, just we have our last slide here about our staff. Kim Henry is our director, myself, Gwen Sanders, Edric Hammond, and Kim Fox, who is here with us today on this. So we cover different aspects of the state, whether it's construction, professional services, the colleges, commodities, and from all 95 counties. Okay. That's all I had, and I'd like to know if there's any questions for either for Wistim or myself or Kim.
I do want to just notate in there, Wisting gave some good information in our chat. So just for businesses to know, missed the page, who you want to do business with determines who you want to be certified with. If someone is asking for you to be certified, find out why they are asking, and that will help determine which certification is correct for you. So whether that is a state or a federal certification, also notate you can have more than one. So you don't just need to be certified in one category or one agency. You can have multiple certifications with different agencies. A lot of times they just require you to pick a certain certification category, whether it's women-owned, minority-owned, small business, etc. So like for us with the state of Tennessee, you can only be certified as one of those 5 categories, even if you do qualify as more than one. I'll kind of open up the floor the last few minutes that we have here to see if anybody has any other specific questions or if they need anything else. All right, well, I don't see anybody unmuting themselves or typing that I can see on my end. So I will go ahead and say thank you guys all for attending this. It was very, hopefully you guys got some great information. There was a lot of stuff that WISTE provided that I had no idea existed as different resources. We will be posting the recorded copy of this by the end of the day, as well as PDF versions of our PowerPoints. So you can go back and reference those as well. Thank you so much for you guys for attending, and thank you, WISTE, for your time.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.